Greetings, guys, again. You're probably getting used to me at this point if you've come this far. So this is this is the final section, unfortunately enough. It's the finish, the connections. So it's the connections. What is the connections? The connections is we'll be talking about. It's all of the above, so to speak. But we're also going to try and simplify that process for you, or use, I hope. So the connections is your, using your rationale a lot. What we talked about, your true self over your imposter, or what tends to be the rumination, the unwanted thoughts, which people can even term in a labelling sense as paranoia, which the message is time and time again to therapy to move away from what is damaging or harmful labelling in the first place, which is your imposter and rumination. So this is part of your connections, what I term in my own terminology the interlinks, also, or the triggers. The triggers or tendencies is really important of the imposter. Triggers and tendencies can also really go off kilter in terms of people's addictions, or what can be a form of addiction, whether it's in substance abuse, what we term as a drug or an alcohol issue, where it's controlling us, but also buying into the imposter, triggers of the mind. This also tends to be, it's probably fair to say, but not to categorise it too much, what happens females, where people are imposting themselves with a relationship for food, for instance, such as what I deal with in terms of where there's an anorexia issue. Again, I move further away from the label, that's so people don't label themselves too much, but dealing with what can be, in that sense, anorexia triggers or bulimia tendencies is another one that tends to be renowned more with females than males, but is related to your imposter, your rumination. So when people learn to rationalise this and be their true selves, it almost happens by default, which is a wonderful thing to see in terms of the connections, where people can really identify and become conscious self-aware of where the triggers and tendencies that's pushed them towards a very debilitating, very negative sense of being around their eating habits, for instance, or self-image is another classic case in point or example of that, how people perceive themselves when they look in the mirror or in a photograph even, that they can actually acknowledge themselves in a photograph, and they can acknowledge themselves more and more by having routine eating habits, healthy, nutritional eating habits. This is internal control. This is your rationalisation working in your favour. That tends to happen almost by default when people's self-esteem grows, when their self-confidence grows, when they're almost blossoming, flourishing again. How do we do this? The person learns through the therapy, through the story, through the advice, through the encouragement, to enable themselves in a very positive sense, and that tends to cross over into every avenue of life, including how they eat, or including how they perceive themselves when they look in the mirror. So they become safe and comfortable with themselves when they look in the mirror, for instance, or how they eat, or how they or in a person's relationship with themselves, which has been further triggered by a substance issue such as drugs and alcohol. How they learn to combat these triggers more and more, the more their self-morale grows, self-esteem grows, where they can look in the mirror even and not see such a perceived threat or danger, or see such a perceived threat or danger in their surroundings or their environment. Your kind of fight, flight, fear syndrome, where you're using the fight and challenge and motivation to do in your favour rather than against you, and you don't feel the need to flight or fear so much. Claustrophobia also comes into in this sense. This is your connections to all we've been talking about before. Again, people can feel very claustrophobic in their surroundings if they're almost flighting for something else that's happened in their life, or their experiences in their life that's remained the trapped wind, the emotional baggage we talked about earlier. The more that emotional baggage becomes more open, more through hearing yourself into therapy, for instance, the more you can let go of the claustrophobic tendencies. Or it's fair to say we all feel cabin fever, flight fear to some extent, but the more we can combat the triggers, the more we feel the need not to flight, not to feel too much flight, not to feel too much vulnerability or overwhelming. Where it tends to become the overwhelming again, where the imposter sitting on shoulder waiting for the angle can be the trigger of tendency in anorexia for the people with bulimic tendencies around addictions, in the drug and drink sense. You know, the more we feel in control of the wheels, the more we're describing the emotions for ourselves, or the emotions, the more this is getting fed to what we talked about earlier, your amygdala, your emotional centre. What you're feeding your emotional centre in empowering, resilient language is that, you know, you're okay, that you understand why vulnerable things have happened before. You're almost already in a reciprocal effect, turning those behaviours into empowering language, normal vulnerabilities, normal stressors. You know, how we think, how it controls how we think and feel. So things, you know, to simplify the process, things tend to happen in tandem, almost in our favour when we accept, when we validate our thoughts and feelings. The recognition, validation, accepting our real thoughts and feelings, even accepting the vulnerable ones, are the ones that have been making us feel really vulnerable in some cases, overwhelmed, where the burden becomes greater than the sum of its parts. When we actually learn that, again, it's the conscious self-awareness, the understanding that learns us this. When we learn the triggers, the tendencies, what's being overwhelming us, this in itself, you know, the real secret point, this is our solution focus. This is the fix. This is what fixes us all. And when we buy into that mantra in a rational, objective sense, a very fair sense, always understanding that we're not controlling others by doing this, but just controlling how we're thinking and feeling in a positive, rational sense. This is, in essence, the answer to almost everything. But you have to think and feel that out for yourself in a therapeutic sense. And when we think and feel that out for ourselves, that's our motivation to keep on doing. That's our new learned behaviours. That's our new mantra. That's our new rituals. That's when we're not feeling obsessed, impulse triggered too much by anything. We're accepting our normalities, our normal vulnerabilities, our normal stresses. And I always say to people, and what, you know, a 7, 8 out of 10 in a think and feeling sense, which tends to be the case in this regard, is absolutely fine day to day. You know, particularly with the stressors of the modern world, particularly with the pace of the modern world, you know. And it learns to calm, compose our thoughts outside of any racing thoughts, which tends to be confusion and certainty. The opposite is certainty, self-assuredness, anti-confusion, so to speak. That's your resilience working in your favour. And if we can do that 70-80% of the time, you know, we're really onto something there. Have a think about all this, guys. Maybe let me know even the feedback if there's any other themes you'd like to explore. I'll certainly be exploring other themes in the future. And feel free to feedback again. Anything you have around the video, anything you feel you need to add, anything for the future or the present, and you know how it's made you think and feel the videos, you know, and hopefully it's grown your conscious self-awareness to some degree, your education within yourself, your internal self. Hopefully you can bring that with you more and more. If you need anything more than that, please feel free to contact. And but I'd really appreciate your feedback, and in the acknowledgement sense, enabling you to reach the summit and myself, it's please feel free to leave as much feedback as you can. And thanks for joining us during the videos, and I really hope it's done something for all of you. And in the universal sense, ciao, goodbye, auf Wiedersehen, or your specific language for now. Thank you very much, guys.